I feel like women should be at least compensated like 50% when they do have to go out on maternity leave.
So for the 12 weeks or however long they should be paid for not working.
At least for the minimal time period. Like it's minimum like six weeks. 6 weeks for vaginal birth and 8 weeks for a C-section. Like that's kind of standard. So I feel like they should be compensated at least, or be able to, collect their disability money, their short-term disability money or whatever for that time period. And then if it goes beyond, then FMLA should kick in.
So why do you think, because that's a big issue with a lot of critics of this professor, is why am I paying someone if they're not contributing to the workforce? And if I have to hire someone else to do the job that they can't do right now for however long that period of time is. So why is it that you're an advocate of a pregnant woman getting paid for her absence?
Because I'm creating another little worker for you. If your company stays around for, 18, 20 more years, then, I've added to society. Like, I think it's more than just, business. Back to my same stance. Like, this is something that has to happen. It's no way to avoid women having to have babies. So I feel like they should be compensated when they have to have a baby.
Well, depending on if you feel like women have to or if you feel like they're choosing to.
It's a choice, but it has to happen. It's one of those choices that have to happen. Like we have to eat. Some people overeat, but we have to eat. It's a choice whether you sit here and eat a slice of pizza and be satisfied or eat a whole pizza. Now, this might be getting into some sticky, like nitpicky things or whatever, but you really can't discriminate in a way. Say, okay, if you got 5 kids, then no, we ain't paying for it. But if you have 1 or 2 kids, then it's okay.
Right. Because then there is that, where do we draw the line? And I know, and just so I'm not making it seem as if it's just men that are critics, a lot of women who are, specifically those who are choosing not to have kids, are very strong, critics of these type of policies, because they feel like, look, I've made the choice not to have a child, and here this person is demanding to have this accommodation in place on the mere fact that they are female capable of having a child. Like I don't want to feel as if women should have certain types of disadvantages that men, don't have to, deal with. So, and I'm just putting that out there so it doesn't seem as if I'm just saying these are all for men. Both sexes equally weigh in on this issue.
And then those women that hold that position and say, well, I chose not to have a baby. The reason you chose not to have a baby is not because you wanted to keep this job. You made that decision for some other reason.
Or
and I have
some
to
of it is
compensate for you.
My career was more important, or because, I feel like apparently this law isn't in place. So obviously pregnancy isn't considered a disability. So as of now, if you become pregnant, you're not protected by this statute. And you have to understand whatever consequences that's going to have for you in the workplace. And so you're going to have women that say, well, I knew this going in, and I decided, I'm going to stick to the job that I have, climb up this corporate ladder, because that's more important to me than having a kid and then having to take a step back from my career in order to provide for this kid.
But, okay, you say it's not considered a disability under the act, but pregnant women are a protected class. So
under the sex discrimination, under Title VII sex discrimination, they're protected in terms of you can't tell someone you're fired because you're pregnant. Now, if someone says, I can't lift for 20 pounds or so, then they can say, well, you're fired because you can no longer do the essential functions of your job. You see the difference?
And then I say to that employer, okay, so I lift this box that's 20 pounds and I pull something. Now what?
now you can either get workers' compensation benefits because you have developed an injury as a result of doing whatever work on your job, or you can get your medical leave and take whatever time off under that statute.
So then, do you think that it's more expensive for an employer to say, hey, I'll pay somebody $8 an hour to lift that box that you can't lift temporarily, rather than I lift that box anyway, I get injured, God forbid I lose my baby, and I sue you?
Well, now, to be fair, if your doctor told you can't lift a certain amount of pounds and you go and lift that anyways, you can't blame your employer for doing something that you knew could cause an injury, because therein you're taking the assumption of risk by picking it up knowing you're not supposed to, or knowing that it can cause you to strain whatever muscle or nerve system that it eventually strained.
But you know what? I can honestly say, I never remember my doctor saying specifically don't lift X amount of pounds. And then another thing, I always think is relative too, where if my doctor was to say, oh, don't lift anything more than 20 pounds, but I'm a person who lifts weights and I regularly lift with 45 or 50 pound weights, really? It's relative to the person. So I might be able to lift that 50 pounds while I'm pregnant, but somebody else might not be able to lift 20 pounds while they're pregnant because it might be a strain to them.
And one interesting case, and I don't want to prolong the segment, but just really quickly, there was a case out in the Sixth Circuit where an employer found out his employee was pregnant and actually told her, look, why don't you get a doctor's note saying you can't lift a certain amount of pounds, or saying whatever it is that obviously you're going to have restrictions for. And this employee went out and did it. And initially the doctor said, you're fine, don't worry about it. And the employer said, well, why don't you just be sure, just make sure it's okay, get a second opinion. She goes out, gets the restriction, comes back, he puts her in a light duty assignment. And she decided, I'm going to sue because now you've regarded me as being disabled. You forced me to go out, get this restriction, so you're basically treating me as if I can't do the job. And under the act, if you're regarded as disabled, then you're protected. So it can cause for a sticky situation with employers if, they find out you're pregnant and then treat you differently, versus if you don't come to them and say, look, I have this 20-pound restriction. Will you not, have me lift 20 pounds? So I guess to your scenario, if you lifted and you pull a muscle and you never told this person that you had this restriction, you can't blame the employer. But then the employer doesn't want to force you to go get the restriction so that you aren't in a position to pull a muscle. And I just thought it was an interesting point when I read that case, because it's kind of one of those things where it's like an employer is trying to be sensitive to the issue and still get sued because of it. So, but is there anything else you want to add regarding this issue? I think it's a very interesting topic, to the point that because a lot of states, particularly Michigan, they pretty much enacted a statute that forced employers who have pregnant workers to put them on light duty work. So instead of saying don't work for a while and come back when you're able to do all these restrictions that are under your job description, you have to put that person in a light duty assignment, thereby paying them for whatever light duty work that they're performing. And I think at some point other states may not follow suit, but it's definitely something that has caused a lot of states and a lot of people to address the issue and consider whether or not changes should be made to the statute. So thank you, Latrice, for coming on today. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Tweet me at Regina_Sun and let me know what you think. Do you think pregnant workers should be considered protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act? Thanks for listening, and that is today's Legal Moment.